Hey, before we start this episode, I want to let you know that my book, Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous, is releasing into the world in paperback, hardback, audiobook, and ebook format on January 28th, and I want you to have a copy of it. Go to barenakedbravery.com to learn all about it, and let's get into this episode. Whoa, are we in for a ride today? Yuri Cataldo is with us this week to share his story of bravery through business and career and theater and art. And I really am excited about this because he is the perfect blend of marketing, theater, art world kind of things. And I think people like him, I am so grateful for, because I know that there are artists and theater buffs and people who need someone who has this kind of chutzpah that Yuri's got, and I am so excited to share this with you. So Yuri is a classically trained set and costume designer, and he studied at Juilliard and Yale and he's got credits on Broadway, feature films, indie films, dance, theater, opera, the whole thing. However, with a couple of turns and twists in the economy, in 2011, he founded this company called Indigo H2O, and it's actually the only multiple award-winning bottled alkaline water in the world, and it was the 2015 best tasting water in the world, which is so crazy that he goes straight from building sets and costumes in Juilliard all the way to being an award-winning bottled water company owner. It's amazing. So through all of the stuff that he's done with Indigo H2O, which has been sold in like all over the world, he's then worked with the Oscars, Golden Globes, Emmys, MTV VMAs, and has been featured in, has really got the PR thing on lockdown. So he's worked with CNN, BuzzFeed, Playboy, Huffington Post, PBS, the whole gamut. So he is currently today, he was the architect of the Business of Creative Enterprises major at Emerson College, where he was an advisor for all of these students. He was named one of the 40 under 40 business leaders in Indiana, and he is also the host of Advance Your Art podcast, which is focused on the journey from artist to entrepreneur. And currently he's the CMO of a tech company and speaks on the connection between art and entrepreneurship at conferences and universities around the country. So I basically gave you all the dots, and now Yuri is going to connect all of those dots for you, because how does somebody do all of those things? Well, we're about ready to find out. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today, because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet, tag them in one of my Instagram posts, my handle is Emily Ann Pete, or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world, so let's be brave together. Yuri Cataldo is here.
Emily, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
This is going to be, we're kind of doing your pre-interview talk, and I'm really excited about this because it's going to be a smorgasbord of bravery.
Sure, we can describe it that way, but yeah, I definitely have a plethora of random things I've had to overcome.
I also just haven't used that word in a while, so
smorgasbord, it's a good word. I feel like it's underused in the everyday language.
It is. It is. Okay, so you got your start with things, career-wise. Let's just start there. Career-wise, you got your start how?
Career-wise. So technically, career-wise, I started late high school days wanting to be an engineer. So I went to school. I went to Purdue University in Indiana because that's where I'm from. And if you want to be an engineer, you go to Purdue. So I get a free ride to be a mechanical engineer. And 2 years into the program, I realized it was a huge waste and not what I wanted. So I dropped out. I dropped out actually at the end of a class because I had chatted with the substitute professor who was a NASA rocket scientist, because of course he was. And we were just kind of hanging out afterward. And he asked, I asked him a question. I was like, so everybody here likes to rebuild car engines and like measure things. And I'm not interested in any of this. I, at the time, was in a band and was like, this is not really creative. So he looked at me, and I think maybe he might have been joking, but he said, well, that's great, Yuri. So what are you doing here if you don't like it? And I said, you know what? That's good. That's a very good point. And the next day I dropped out. Yeah.
Of college completely, or just the major?
No, of college. I dropped out of Purdue the very next day because I was like, well, so Purdue sucks. So West Lafayette sucks in general. It's a really boring place. I didn't really like that location anyway. And so I didn't really need that much of an excuse to get out. So that's just what it was. So I dropped out and moved back home with my parents. And I'm from northern Indiana. So I moved back in with my parents and tried to figure out what to do next, which then led to me taking a bunch of random classes at the local Indiana University outlet, extension in South Bend. So then I thought I would be a journalist. I took a bunch of journalist and writing classes. In my writing class, I was accused of plagiarism 7 different times by the professor.
I didn't laugh at that, but I think it's really funny.
At the time, it was kind of like, what? She was like, well, she's like, your writing is better than your age. So you're clearly stealing this from someone. I'm like, this is a creative writing class. I don't know what you're like. I don't know how you think I'm doing this. Also, if it's all in the same voice, like what's the... So I decided that then writing was a bad career if I was going to be just accused of plagiarism all the time. So then I took some other classes. I forgot what was happening next after that. But I ended up taking a couple of theater classes, designed for the theater classes, and absolutely loved it because it was everything that I could combine together. So it was like psychology, philosophy, design, art, everything combined to one. And so then I got into theater and then went from Indiana University in South Bend to the main campus because I didn't like the South Bend campus anymore. So I did that. And then after I graduated, I then got into Juilliard and went there for a year for a specialized program in design. And then I got into grad school at Yale. So then I spent 3 years learning the craft of being a Broadway set and costume designer. And then I graduated just in time for the economy.
Side note, I have seen some pretty phenomenal set design pieces with like the traveling Broadway shows that have come through all the towns that I've lived in. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. So magical.
Yeah. Oh, they're great. When theater is done correctly, it's like this, it's another experience because you're visually entertained and you're learning something about yourself at the same time. It's great.
I think it's part of the set design is what contributes to someone feeling like they're getting sucked into an experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Because it's part of, if you're constantly staring at the set, then you've lost it. Because part of it is you're right, it's supposed to set up the experience so that you forget that you're sitting in a theater, unless it's like Brechtian theater, and then that's a whole separate thing where they're like making it very obvious and like blast the audience, let them know that this is all fake. But yeah, especially like a realistic set, it's beautiful because you feel like you're just kind of like a fly on the wall watching this world happen in front of you.
So you graduate from Yale with this very lovely bouquet of degrees.
Yes. Fine collection of arts degrees. Yes.
Then what?
And then, so I did what I thought I was going to do. And I went straight from grad school right into assisting on Broadway from like 4 different people. So I worked on a movie immediately. I worked on the movie When in Rome. And then I switched over and then did the research for the Broadway show West Side Story, which was being remounted at that time. So I worked with David Woolard on that. And then the same time, I was working with this designer. Her name is Carrie Robbins. She's absolutely wonderful Broadway designer, helping her as a curator for this big exhibition at the New York Performing Arts Library, and also doing research for another designer for an opera in LA. So in the theater world, these don't pay that well. So you kind of have to do like 5 things at once. So that's what I was doing, like 5 things at the same time. And so I was doing these all throughout. So I graduated in 2008. And so I worked with all of them until the end of 2008. And in 2009, I worked for a movie producer in New York because I decided to take a little bit of a break after working on a couple of Broadway shows, because they're basically 7 days a week, 14-hour days for like 5 months kind of a thing, which is exhausting. So then I jumped into movie producer, which was totally different because it was great. He would show up mostly sober around 11 and then sleep on his couch, and I would read books and scripts for him and then like do coverage. And so I ended up chatting with him about a project, which ultimately went on to be the Broadway show Once. And years after I helped him with that in the beginning, I think he won like 13 Tony Awards for it, which was good for him. So I worked for him for a few months, and then he bankrupted the company and then took half of the staff with him to another company. And I was the newest hire. So I got cut off, and that was 2009, right when the economy collapsed and caught like that. Once the recession caught up to New York City and the performing arts market, then everything went away. I reached out to the people I worked on Broadway with, and they didn't even have jobs. Like the top tier designers, there were no projects coming. The shops, the costume shops and the scene shops were shut down for a while.
Wow.
I worked for Juilliard for a little bit after that, but I came to the realization over the summer that I either had to, if I was going to stay in New York, I had to take on a bunch of debt and then try something totally different, or pack up my things and move back to Indiana and live with my parents. And so, same time, I was going through a divorce at that exact same time too.
Oh my gosh.
Which made it look a little worse. I don't always like to bring that up sometimes, but that's part of the reason why I had to like also get out of New York, is because I was like, I can't afford anything anymore. So that was the other reason why. So in fall of 2009, I packed up my things and moved back to Indiana, live with my parents.
One of my favorite, I've been watching a lot of stand-up lately just because Netflix now thinks that's my favorite thing to do. And it might actually be.
It might be. According to Netflix. Netflix is smarter than you are about what you like. So it probably is. And
it was right. So I watched Ryan Hamilton's special called Happy Face. I don't know if you're familiar with his stuff.
No.
He's hilarious. His face looks ridiculous. And that's like the first thing he talks about is he looks like he could sell ice cream in the 1950s. And one of his bits was all about how in New York, you know, they always say in New York, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And he lives in New York, and he's like, it's not true. And then he goes into saying how like, well, a lot of New Yorkers couldn't survive Idaho, which is where I'm from. They'd like go out looking for a gluten-free muffin and just die of starvation. So it's hilarious. I love his stuff. And I think that's really, you know, comedians have the role of telling truth to us in ways that we need it to be delivered to us.
Right.
And I love it because New York has this low tolerance for failure or hiccups or obstacles. Right. It's like if you get any sort of hiccup in your journey of whatever you're trying to do and become in New York, then sorry, you got to leave.
Well, I don't think it's like a memo that just gets passed around. Definitely the cost of New York probably is the memo. Like
that is the memo.
Suddenly you failed, unless you want to be. And I didn't want to be the cliche starving artist who was like sleeping on a bunch of friends' couches and working 13 jobs as a waiter and busboy in order to make ends meet. I was kind of I had a little more pride than that. Although I ended up doing something kind of like that in Indiana. But but yeah, definitely. And a lot of more of my friends started dropping off and leaving New York shortly after I did too. So yeah, so apparently that memo just got passed around to everybody eventually.
I mean, I started, when I was a full-time cellist, I started teaching full-time right when the recession got its worst.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And so I knew after I could afford to live off of the little group of students that I had that, well, if I can do that, then I'm going to be okay, because clearly there's a recession happening. And I actually got hit with it a year after everything.
Oh, okay.
A year after everyone was freaking out about it was the time that they looked at their budgets and they were like, oh, cello lessons, maybe we shouldn't do that. So I feel you on that. It sucks. So what did you do when you were at home back in Indiana?
When I was back moping in Indiana. So I tried to figure out what to do next. Granted, I wasn't a pleasant person to be around in the beginning, going through a divorce, having to change my life around and then kind of start over again. So I was, right when I moved back, I had a semester offer to be a professor at Indiana University in South Bend. So it was another
full circle moment.
Full circle thing. It was. So the best part about that is, so the main costume professor that I hated at Indiana University South Bend, which was part of the reason why I left after a year of that program, was being fired, and I was taking over her job, which I actually, the reason why I took that job at that time was because I was like, yes, it shows her, because I'm better than she is. Also, that's how easily replaceable you are. So she was a terrible professor and a mean person in general. I don't really like to speak ill of people, but I really didn't like her at all. She got off on making students cry. It was very, very weird. And she would say awful things to people. And she was a chain smoker. So she would take you outside so she could chain smoke and then say awful things to you about how terrible you are as a human being, which seems to be unnecessary as a professor to also tell you your life is shit. So I did take great pleasure in taking her job for a semester. So I did that, which, being a adjunct professor at an extension school in Indiana, doesn't really pay that well. I had other bills. So in addition, at night, I was a server, which was great because then students of mine would come in to where I was working. I worked for this place called Granite City Brewery. I think bar and brewery, something like that. So they made their own beer and the food wasn't that bad. So at night and on weekends, I was a server. Also, my boss, the dean of the university program, would come in sometimes. And I think it also, he found great pleasure in, the fact that I was his server, because he would introduce me to, the people around, oh, this is one of our professors. I was like, do you really want to say that your professors make so little money that they're also serving?
Oh, no.
Right. So that wasn't kind of sad. Although at the same time, I was working with a law student and then 2 med students, all who had just graduated but hadn't found jobs yet. So then there was 3 other PhDs. So my boss at Granite City was like, I've got the smartest staff around because we're all these overeducated people who graduated just in time for the recession and couldn't find anything. So we're just having these weird conversations in the back about what's going on with medical industry, and also the lawyer was throwing a lot of things. And so it was if nothing else, I was in good company. So I didn't feel too bad about that. So after that all ended, I ended up getting a job. I talked my way into a job at a TV station selling advertisements. So local TV station.
Wait, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Just a job? Just anything just to not be serving?
Well, the professor job ended after a semester because they had someone else then. So it was summertime and serving doesn't pay that well. It was a nice side cash only thing, but I didn't make that much money. And so I needed something full time. And so I was looking around in northern Indiana for jobs, and there was an opening in a sales position at a local TV station. And so I talked my way into that job because my resume before that was all theater gig. And so I don't know how actually I got the interview, but I ended up sitting down with the station manager and he was like, okay, So I'm looking at your interview. Congratulations, you've worked with Al Pacino. Actually, that has gotten me into a couple of interviews in general because in grad school, I designed a movie with Al Pacino. And so sometimes I get called into interviews just so they can ask me what it's like to work with Al Pacino. It's happened twice, which is a really annoying job interview when you're like, I'm here for a real job, not to have this stupid conversation. Mm-hmm. I don't know. He was nice. He likes to smoke. He couldn't remember my name. Moving on.
Back to me.
So yeah, back to why I'm here. You said you're going to pay me for something. So Al Pacino helped me get a couple of interviews. And so basically I was like, I have been working in the arts the last 10 years and I've been selling myself clearly successfully because I have all these great credits on Broadway and with Al Pacino. So think if I can sell myself and be involved in Broadway shows and big shows, think how much easier it is to sell your product, which is not a personal, like it's not me, to other people. So he was like, okay, well, that's a good enough argument. We'll let you try. And he handed me a phone book and he said, now go sell something. And so I worked for that TV station for a year, selling something.
Anything or just
anything? Well, TV. I mean, so they're a TV station. They've only got one product, and that's we sell commercials. And so I spent a lot of time with my other coworkers, like learning how to sell. And I spent a lot of time sitting in my car trying to psych myself up to go in and cold call businesses.
Ugh.
Because I didn't have a territory. I just wasn't allowed to, like all the big dollar ones were taken. So there was no car dealerships or whatever the big dollar ones are. I could only go into these small, like mom and pop shops. And so I would get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and then drive. And then it's literally probably sit in the parking lot for an hour in my car, trying to come up with some reason, should I go do something else or no? And forcing myself to go inside to say hi and chat with them and find out what they're doing business-wise and how I could help them with their marketing.
Whoa. Because that sounds like hell to me. Just cold calls in general are hard.
Cold calls they're terrible, but I recommend that everybody at some point in their life do it, at least for a month. Because what it does is it helps you get over that fear of chatting with someone for no reason. Either that or, try to go be a pickup artist and pick up on people at the bar. It's getting out of your way, getting over that fear that somehow when you go chat with this person, that they're going to punch you in the face and call you an idiot. Because guess what? Sometimes you may be called an idiot, but the worst case scenario never happens.
It's true. And because I've done it for a month plus before. And when you have when you're doing something like that, when you're selling advertising or trying to convince someone that they want something that they didn't think that they needed when they woke up that morning, that's a tricky conversation. But it also is not the end of the world to get rejected.
No, not at all. It's actually really easy. They just say, you know what? No, thank you. And you're like, oh, okay.
Cool.
Well, all right then.
I'll go to my next call. Yeah.
Exactly. I go on the next one. Or, if you want, then, once you start feeling more comfortable, then you start doing overcoming objections and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, honestly, just going in and saying hi was my main goal. So I was started with baby steps. Let me just go in and say hi. Let's pretend I'm not even selling anything. Let's just see if I can chat with them about what they're working on. And then maybe I'll go back later. So it was small baby steps into that. Or eventually, so I never got really good at this. So you're not going to have that story where I was and I was the number one. I was never number one anything. I was average at best. Mostly because I just got tired of what I was doing after about 6 months. I was this is kind of dumb. I'm tired of trying to sell TV spots to the same type of people over and over and over again, pretending that it is the answer to all of their problems, because it's not. In some cases, it definitely was beneficial, but most cases I was just getting them to spend money they didn't necessarily need to spend. Mm-hmm. But during that time, so about 6 months in, this will be 2011 in January, I decided that I wanted to start a company. I actually made up my mind to start a company the moment I was driving away from New York and moving back home. On that drive home, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life or the next stage of my life, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a company. And on that drive home, I decided it was going to be a bottled water company. I don't remember exactly why I chose bottled water at that time, but I think my parents told me something about they were at a conference and somebody was talking about water to them. And I was like, oh, water's everywhere. That's great.
But basically you wanted to start a company and own a business.
Yes, yes. And I arbitrarily chose bottled water.
And how much of that was rooted in if I can't control my job, at least then I could control my company?
I mean, I think part of that was, again, coming from a completely naive part, because I had no idea how companies and businesses work. It was, so I had just lost all, I just going through a divorce and lost my jobs, all circumstances that I couldn't control.
Yeah.
So it definitely came from I want to be able to control something. So if I can't control the economy, I can't control if I get hired for a job, I'm going to be the person then who is then hiring other people and then running this organization, because at least then I can control that.
Yeah.
Well, that's nothing where that came from. That's probably textbook something, right?
Whatever.
So,
sure.
So I made that decision. And then, 2011, I officially launched the company Indigo H2O. So I had spent some of that time while I was working for the TV station on days where I didn't feel like chatting with people. I would go to Barnes & Nobles when they existed. I think they still exist some places. And then use that as my personal library. So I would go through their business section and I would sit at the cafe and I would just read books. And then I would mark them and put them back on the bookshelf and then come back the next day. I know you probably shouldn't do that, but nobody was buying them anyway. So I would go and I'd find out what the latest business books were and I just would read them. And I think I went through 7 or 8 business books and decided that I had enough information, and then started doing a business plan. I reached out to people that I knew. So there were 2 key things that helped me officially launch Indigo H2O, and then I'll tell you what happened with it. So the first one was I read the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And I found that book because during Christmas vacation with my parents, we were in Florida. I was like, first day there, I'm going to go running on the beach because now that I'm not in Indiana, I'm athletic. So I go jogging on the beach. Wind picks up. I get this blasted with sand in my face, and I step into this stupid hole that some kid dug because he was making a sandcastle, twisted my ankle. My vacation was done. I hobble back. My ankle's swollen. And so the next day I'm like, well, I can't do anything. I hobble over to a used bookstore, and that's where I found this book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And then so I hobble back and then read it. And after that week, suddenly everything was clicking. So whether you like Tim Ferriss or not, I mean, he's kind of a polarized because he's kind of full of himself, but he has good ideas about how to outsource things. And the one thing that book did, which many books did not, was give me a step-by-step game plan about how to take an idea and turn it into a company and find out if it actually was worth being a company or if it was just a stupid idea that you should just move on and call it a hobby or a passion or something like that. So read that book. It was great. Around the same time, at a dinner party at my parents' house, I met some of their old friends who used to run this giant online furniture company called FurnitureFind.com. It was part of the original .com bust. But they had grown this. They were 2 brothers. They had grown it from nothing to this huge company worth billions of dollars. They sold it off. They got bought out and it was great. And then then the economy, first .com bust happens. And they decide to buy it back or something. I'm not quite sure how that worked out, but they had made a bunch of money, I think mostly with stock options, and then lost it all. But they had then started a consulting company. And so over dinner and a couple glasses of wine, I'm talking about my idea and what I'm working on. And they were like, well, if you show us a business plan, we'll help you out with this. We know the online part of it because that's what I would want to do. So they're like, well, you get this set up. We'll put up this little website for you and we'll help you test your idea. I'm like, fantastic. That's great. So I had the water idea, I had the plan, I had the people who were going to help me, and the rest I kind of made up. So I went to the local wine store and I bought a bunch of bottles because I knew that I wanted to have glass bottles. So I bought a bunch of bottles, all different colors. I went to a party that night and I walked around with these glass bottles and I put water in them. And I started selling these glass bottles to people and I asked them how much they would pay for it. And the blue bottle got the most, mostly because the girl, I think she thought I was cute. Also, she wanted to use it as a vase. But either way, out of my small sample size of like 5 bottles, I got the most for the blue one. So I'm like, great, I'm going blue from now on. So I bought more blue bottles. I photoshopped a label on it and we mocked up the site and put it up online and sold cases of water that I didn't even have. So I kind of did crowdfunding before a few years before it actually was a thing.
Which a lot of people don't do. And I have to say that is, they wish that they had, right? Because they've put an enormous amount of effort into the podcast they want to start or the art thing they want to do or the business they want to build or the product that they want to create. And they build it without having asked anybody anything. And then they release it and find out, no one wants it in blue. Everyone wants it in pink.
Right, exactly. Or someone already came up with that idea and they did it better than you did.
Totally.
Because you living in a bubble, you never noticed it, dummy.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have a lot of people who I know who have stories like that. Mm-hmm. Who just were like, well, I had this great idea and I'm just going to think and put on blinders and just do it. And then you're like, but something's wrong. You missed this entire big thing. So I did it in stages. We launched it. And then 2 weeks later, I sold a bunch of water that I didn't have. So I was like, great, I guess now I'm a company. Fortunately, I'd done my research and so I had everything lined up and everything was in place so that the moment we realized it was good, we could pull the trigger and go. And so officially in February of 2011, Indigo H2O was a thing. Although it wasn't called that first. It was first called Simple Water, but I couldn't get the trademarks for it. So it somehow ended up becoming Indigo H2O after a while.
So what happened with it?
So over the course between 2011 and 2015, I won 3 international awards, was named the best tasting water in the world, got featured in the Oscars, the Golden Globes, the Emmys, the MTV Video Music Awards, dozens and dozens of articles. So Forbes, Inc., Huffington Post, Discovery, Playboy, a bunch of other random magazines. I got really good at PR. So February 2015, same weekend, I am in the Oscar gift bags, as well as at this award. It's called the Berkeley Springs International Water Tasting. I wasn't there, but every year I enter it. So both things happened. So leading up to that weekend, I knew I was in the Oscar gift bags, got a ton of great press. It was wonderful. So that weekend, Oscars happen. I get more great press. Also, that Saturday night, I win the award for the best tasting water in the world. So my PR brain goes to work again. The following week, more great press. So I'm like, Oscar water and best tasting water in the world. Boom. A week. So my sales are skyrocketing. I was selling at the local Whole Foods in Mishawaka, and I was doing interviews there. I was single-handedly driving, infecting their bottom line. There were people from 100-mile radius driving to that store to buy the Oscar water. That's how awesome it was. Went from selling 3 cases a week to 400 cases a week. It was kicking ass and taking names.
Whoa.
I was getting orders from around the world for the water. It was awesome. At the same time I was doing all this, I worked as a set design professor to kind of mostly cover my bills because having a startup is, you never know when money's coming in. I get an email from the State Department of Health to my professor account, not my name is everywhere, along as links to find me, to my IU email address that I never check. And it's basically a cease and desist letter. And so for the course of the next month, I had to hire a beverage attorney, and we go back and forth. And basically, the state of Indiana does not have any bottled water regulations. But because I had gotten so much press, I pissed somebody off somewhere in Mike Pence's administration. This is back when Mike Pence was our shitty governor, before he was a shitty vice president. So his administration somehow flagged my company, and they pulled all of my permits.
No.
So I was then contacted, and after going back and forth, and it probably didn't help that I wasn't very nice about it because I was really pissed off about all this. And also being potentially sued by the state government is really I was having panic attacks, and it was really stressful.
I'm going to have a panic attack just hearing this story.
I don't recommend somebody gets sued by a government agency because they've got deep pockets. But basically, my lawyer was like, listen, for whatever reason, you piss somebody off. There is no rhyme or reason to what they're doing. But basically, it's this. If you want to continue to operate in the state of Indiana, you're going to have to start all over, rebuild your facility, and it's got to be at least what, like a Coca-Cola plant level, which is millions of dollars. And my company was like teeny, 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 tiny. I was really good at making my company look huge, bigger than what I was a one-man shop.
Because you're a set designer, so you're able to...
Exactly. It's smoke and mirrors, man. I'm in theater. It's all about the illusion. No one really gets stabbed on stage, but you think they are, or you think that explosion happening. Exactly. That's all I was doing.
Yeah, you're just doing your job.
Yeah. I had, like if you looked at the website, I had like dozens of employees with all fake email addresses that all went to me. Like I would answer, like I would email people in different tones with different names, because sometimes that worked. So I was really good at the smoke and mirrors and with a virtual assistant thing. So that's what it came down to. So in April of 2015, I officially closed Indigo H2O and moved out of Indiana shortly thereafter.
Thank you, Mike Pence.
Right, exactly. Thank you very much, Mike Pence and your stupid administration. So that's what happened to there. So the cool thing is, so that my career ends at Indigo H2O in a whimper. I was then a month later hired by Emerson College in Boston to build a brand new college program for them called the Business of Creative Enterprises, which was really what I was excited about.
I'm sorry. That's cool. I want to talk about it, but... I am so excited for what I'm about ready to tell you. The book that I have been working on for the past year, 2 years, featuring stories that I have undergone in my whole life. The book, Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous, is releasing into the world January 28th of 2018. And I am so terrified and so thrilled and just so excited about all of it. I am really pumped about what's inside of the book. I know that the rest of the world needs to hear it because it is stuff that we have talked about on this podcast so many times. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. We are so glad to have you. This is a wonderful community that has been born out of this research that I started when I started writing this book. The conversations that we've featured here on this podcast are like the breadcrumbs that I've followed to create and write this book. Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous will be available in hardback, paperback, audiobook, and ebook on January 28th at Amazon. And I want you to have the ebook for free. So sign up if you're listening to this episode before January 28th. Sign up by going to barenakedbravery.com or to my own website, emilyannpeterson.com, and you can sign up to get your free copy there. If you are listening to this episode after the book is launched, welcome. We're so glad to have you. There is still excitement happening at both of those sites. You can always download your Bravery bundle at barenakedbravery.com. It is free. It has a bunch of really cool things involved in it, or inside of it, not just involved in it, but inside of it. I want you to be part of this. I'm so excited. Let's celebrate. How did you go from total flat out rejection and dead end, like full stop dead end, to a month later, I'll go start something brand new?
When you say it that way, it doesn't make as much sense.
I mean, I just know that if it were me, I would need at least 6 months of I would need to go to have a soul nurturing job at a garden center or something like that.
Sure.
To just unplug my brain from success and failure.
Yeah. That may have been a better idea than what I did. I have a tendency of so failure happens and I'm like, fuck it. I got to keep going because you can call it like a fear of missing out or something. There's always been this inherent drive inside me to keep pushing forward in spite of like health issues or, probably should stop and relax, but I keep pushing forward and trying new approaches for things. It's like I just don't give up on that. So even if I was going through like bouts of depression during that time and feeling a failure, because that's not what you really want to happen with your company, especially since I had like the absolute best week of my business career, followed a week later by the worst. It was like, the pinnacle and then the absolute like bottom of the barrel shit.
And
really
just
close
for
to each other.
context, how long did it take for you to get that email, or between getting the email and, okay, this is over?
I got the cease and desist, what was it? Early March. So a month. It was a month, but technically the moment I got the cease and desist, I was supposed to stop selling water. I didn't know that. My lawyer told me that. He's like, this is a cease and desist. I'm like, yeah, is it really? But again, so I'm not really good on that, the lawyer side. I recommend speaking to real lawyers and not like trying to be your own lawyer. That's a bad idea. On things.
Okay.
Just in general.
So, I'd like to note that we all respond to depression in different ways. And some of us are fighters and we avoid doing the things that will make us feel depressed, right? Some of us are flighters and we retreat, and some of us are just freeze and don't do anything. Mm-hmm. So clearly you're a fighter.
I am. It's definitely a coping mechanism where it's like I have a tendency of doing things that make me feel uncomfortable on purpose, which is there's this weird thing. Like if I find if something really scares me, I will purposely run to do it. Like it's whether it's not like learning how to shoot a gun or suddenly deciding that I'm going to take like 20 to 30 minute ice baths out of nowhere, like things like that I think are weird, that make me feel uncomfortable. I do on purpose. So yeah, I'm definitely
different strokes.
Right, exactly. Different strokes, everybody. Exactly. I don't recommend any of these things the random stuff that I do, but yeah.
So, okay, so then you just start this new thing at this new college.
Yep. Brand new thing at Emerson College, which is really cool. So what I loved about it, and it's partially why I was hired for the job, was because I really liked going to Juilliard and Yale. They were great on the art side, but they were shit on the business side because none of the professors actually have a real job. And I say that in a nice way because all my professors are all older. They're 50s plus. So they began their careers at a time when there were more opportunities. And now they're in that top 5%. So they will always have design jobs because they're the go-to people on Broadway. Mm-hmm. They're not the people you want to ask business advice from because they don't fucking know anything. Mm-hmm. The only advice I ever received, and again, this is from the head of the drama school, who is a phenomenal designer and will always get design jobs. He was like, don't worry about it. Just get an agent and your agent will take care of you. Fucking hell, I had 0 agents and that 0 agent didn't help me out at all. Also, the people that I know who had agents, they didn't have jobs either because there were no jobs. Because who got those jobs? My professors who were already in the pinnacle of their career.
And the same thing applies to visual arts and music and any other piece of academia. Like my dad's in academia, so I have some experience of listening to how this plays out. If your job is to teach it, and that's your job, is to teach it, not to be in the industry constantly, and it's a different story.
Yeah. And they have their place. Like we need researchers. They're very important because they look at the big picture and they connect the dots and look at things, but do not ask a researcher practical business advice because they don't know. They have not been through that. They don't know what it feels like and they haven't experienced it. They've only read about it. So they know the theory, but they don't know the practicality of it. And so that was what I was trying to fix with this program, which combined the arts program and the marketing program at Emerson and jammed them together. So students would be taking, and this is the other thing I thought was important, students were not taking like bastardized, watered down versions of the classes. They were taking their art classes from the art professors and business classes from the business professors. They weren't having some like Mickey Mouse mixed up thing like business for artists taught by a visual artist. Like, no, you don't want that. You want business and arts. And then I created these 7 or 8 classes that then wove everything together. So it connected the dots from what they were learning in the arts classes and the business classes. And it showed them how they could become more of creative entrepreneurs and choose their own careers and their own adventure.
Yeah.
So that was the plan. I was there for a year.
If I could do a standing ovation via podcast, I would. Because I'm not kidding.
Thank you.
We musicians, like all of us artists, need that. My degree was in business management. So I came from the business side. My dad's a marketing professor. The whole time I was just looking at the music department, just wishing I could major in music, But I'm so glad because all of my music friends who don't have business advice or any sort of business acumen at all, they're really struggling. Struggling.
They definitely are. Yeah, because it's the real world is not a nice, delicate place. And
business isn't super difficult. You just have to have like a few basic, this is profit, this is loss.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy with some of that stuff. Or, like if you're creating art, maybe you should find an audience who wants to buy your stuff first and not just create art for art's sake and then get upset when nobody at the coffee shop wants to buy your shit. Mm-hmm. Like, kind of realize it. I say that because I have a few visual artist friends and it drives me nuts when they do that. Like, why would you, first off, who actually buys art at a coffee shop? Because I never have. I've never seen somebody be like, man, you know what's good with this latte is that painting of a cup of coffee. I think I'm going to take that $200. Yeah, take that home with me. Like I think it's smart for the coffee shop because it gives them visual interest. But I was like, does somebody really go to a diner?
I would also say that it depends on the coffee shop.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I made a kind of a blanket statement on that one. But yeah,
generally I would agree with you.
If somebody listening to this podcast has ever purchased art from a coffee shop or has witnessed it, please let me know because I have never seen it happen. I'm honestly am really curious about this. If this has ever happened in the history of coffee shops, I'm sure it has one. Maybe that person's listening in. Please tell me. That'd be awesome.
His contact info is in the show notes. So.
That's right. My God, I'll give you my phone number if you find it. Because I'm that curious. Because I think it's such a giant waste of time. I would like to be proven wrong on that one. Because there are better places to put your art. Again, coffee shops, I don't think are those places. Oh yeah, so program at Emerson. So this is also partially why I started my podcast. The podcast, which is called Advance Your Art, advanceyourart.com. It is an extension of what that program was because a lot of my artistic friends couldn't take classes at Emerson because you're not allowed to. So that's where that came from. So I'm not at Emerson anymore, and I'll tell you why. A year into the program, a new dean gets hired and a new chair of the marketing department comes in. Both decide that some kind of arbitrary guidelines and KPIs, which is like key performance index or indicators, were put on me. So they made up something that I should have been doing that I wasn't doing because I was building this stupid program for them. The dean comes in, decides it's a great program for him to take over because he needs a little feather in his cap. And the chair of the department didn't help any because I don't think she didn't like me at the end because I was cutting her out. So a year into the program, on the very last day of my contract, I get called into their office thinking that I'm just going to be giving this presentation about what to do year 2. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to renew your contract. And I was like, oh, you mean like for next year? They're like, no, this year. It's like, you mean the one that ends today? Today, the last day of my contract, the one that you already said is going to be renewed. You are rescinding that. And today's my last day. They said, yes, that's correct. So there you go. Not happy with those people either.
Politics again for the win.
Exactly. Politics of higher ed. What are you going to do? So at that point, so that was actually a year ago in August, I did go through a little more of a depression on that part because I wasn't. So the worst part about that was I had just moved out to Boston. Like I bought a condo. I was rebuilding my life, and then to have everything kind of pulled like the rug under me suddenly, it did not. It was devastating, and I did kind of sit on the couch for a while on that one because I was like, I can't move back to my parents again. Like, what if I'm not going to get another job? Like, what?
I mean, rightfully so. Yeah, good on you.
I had just done that. Like I had just gotten out of Indiana, and now you guys do that to me again. So I was not happy about that. Fortunately, so I live in Salem, Massachusetts, which is very famous for Halloween. So I started getting creative. So I have a 2-bedroom condo. I rented it out, one of my bedrooms on Airbnb, which worked out great because I was getting $100 a night. I live pretty close to the downtown too. So I live in a historic Victorian house. So I was getting top dollar for renting out a bedroom in my condo. So I was playing host for a while, which is kind of, but I was covering the mortgage. It was doing a lot of things. So that was good while it kind of gave me time to regroup, reset up my resume and figure out what the fuck I was going to do next. And I went through that was a rough period. So that was between August and I didn't have my next job until December. So that time I reached out to friends to try to figure out what am I good at? Because I had no idea what I was going to do next. So I took online quizzes. By the way, there's this online evaluation called the Wealth Dynamics quiz. I recommend that one for everybody versus I'm not sure what's called, like the ENFJ. I forgot what that one's called, but I don't like that one so much. Wealth Dynamics is really good, and it kind of breaks you down into what your strengths are and then tells you who the type of people you should look for. And so I recommend that.
Okay. It's going in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. Wealth Dynamics is great. So I did that a lot and kind of figured out what I was good at, what I wanted to focus on. And I ended up getting a job as the marketing director for a tech startup in December. I basically kind of talked my way into that job too. Ultimately, they hired me because of what I did at Indigo H2O. They looked me up. My bottled water website is still up because I may be relaunching it. But they found it and they're like, well, if this guy can make and sell and market water and do so well, then clearly he could do that with anything. So we're going to hire him.
I was just talking to somebody else the other day because I also consult for a tech startup, and it's their tech startups need creative people.
Oh, yeah.
And more and more and more businesses and corporations are realizing how much they need artists and need creative people. But if us creatives and artists have our blinders on to who needs us and who wants us, then we're not going to see these big ticket meaning like other side opportunities that can help propel you forward in the direction that you really want to go with your career. I mean, it's happening all the time that, somebody's like, no, that's not what I do. I don't help those kinds of people. And then there's somebody on the sidelines going like, but I want you. What? I want you. Don't you want my money?
Right, exactly.
And you're still doing creative things. Marketing is still very creative. When I do copywriting for a company, I'm still working on my songwriting skills because I'm sharpening my writing skills.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Continue.
Well, so there is a yes and no with what you talked about. So businesses, they are begging for creative people, and so are tech startups. The problem is businesses and tech startups don't speak creative in that you have to approach them with their own language. You can't just show, I can't just show up at a tech startup and say, here's my costume design resume. This is why you should hire me. They're going to go, what? No, I don't know. I don't understand how, because you can design a costume or you can design sets on stage and have this, your own freelance career, that why you could help us out. So in a way, you're going to have to create a resume and pitch it in a way that's more aligned to the businesses, because it's even harder with corporations because they have boxes.
And I would say that your job starts before you have the job in that regard.
Oh yeah.
So if you get hired by someone like that, your job will be to connect the dots for their square developer minds to understand why their product is not being sold effectively or whatever.
Right.
I use square developer mind as like, if anybody's listening and they're a developer, I love you. I really do. But the team that I end up meeting with a lot, we always laugh about the Silicon Valley difference between marketing people and developer people, because just like we're talking different languages at each other. And sometimes you need somebody to go, wait a minute. When you say validation, what exactly are you talking about? Because I hear a different thing. So yeah, I would say that if you are going to go for a different kind of client as a creative, then your job starts before you have that job.
It is definitely. And I'm a big fan of James Altucher. He's got a podcast, written a bunch of books, but part of like what he talks about is like coming up with good ideas, like 10 ideas a day kind of stuff. I use a lot of his technique in that was like writing down random ideas for things and giving them away. Coming in to an environment where maybe you have a disadvantage because you're not at the same business level as them with a bunch of great ideas definitely helps sway the scales in your favor. Because if you're like, okay, maybe this person doesn't have the exact background, but they have so many great ideas and they know how to execute them. That's actually what matters the most in a lot of things, is less about your background and more that you can execute good ideas. Well, execution more importantly. Everyone's got ideas, but execution is the hard part.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap this up because I'm loving this, but we're like, I don't want to take your whole day. So my final question to you, sir, is what kind of advice do you have for someone who would like to take their creativity or take their bravery and use it in a unique way?
Ooh, use it in a unique way. Okay.
Yeah, and either to get a corporate client or to get a customer or talk to a group of people that wouldn't normally listen to them.
Sure. So how could someone use their creativity? So basically with that, part of what happens, I guess, especially with that statement, is it's like an I statement, like what can I do to make or to find that kind of stuff. So here's another thing. Design thinking it's a buzzword and artists are already kind of in tune with it. But part of what design thinking does, and it's actually a good idea to kind of read up on this, because the moment you say design thinking in a corporate environment, you're a genius. It's an outward facing approach. So you actually go out and you're asking people what they need and how they think about things. So I would approach it from that way. So you've got artistic skills in anything. Spend some time asking people, and you can do this on the internet. You can, call up people and ask them. You can just go and physically ask people this, but find out what people need, where their pain points are, what they're missing, and then figure out ways to solve that. Like that's ultimately kind of how I've gotten a lot of these jobs from just a background in design. So like with the tech startup, they needed someone who was good at getting out their message. And so I solved that for them. Or like now I work for a big corporation in a job that was created for me. And part of my skills are the fact that I'm good at meeting people, and they needed someone to go and represent them at events in and out into the community and meet people. Like that's feels like a made up job, but that's kind of what that is. And I got that because I reached out to a lot of people and I asked what was happening in the industry and what advice and what needs were out there. So yeah, I reach out, find out what's needed. Also, don't be afraid to ask people if they have ideas for you or if they have introductions for you. Like this last year, I've spent a lot of times like outward facing, asking people like, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think is needed out there? Like if you were creating this magical job for me, what would you call it? And what do you think I'd be good at? And a lot of that helped solve that, because because if I wasn't doing that, I was looking inwardly with my blinders on, like wallowing in my own self-pity and self-doubt. And eventually that drives you nuts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would advise people. Reach out.
I second that advice because every single job, I've never had a normal job, normal being, I'm using it in quotation marks, because every job I've received has been created for me because that has happened. Because I end up, and my favorite professor in college sat me down and said, if you want a job, this is how you do it. And he said, he gave me a list of questions to ask someone and just say that I was interviewing them for a college project. And the last question of the interview was what do you hate about your day-to-day job? And then basically the point is to get that person to list all of the things that they need help with. And then right then and there you say, oh, I can do 2 out of 5 of those things. Would you like to hire me?
That's
works.
Brilliant. And
it
sneaky.
Works like a charm.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Works like a charm.
Yeah,
but it's the same thing. You're asking what they need help with.
Yeah, exactly. You're finding what their pain points are, and then you just solved it. You're like, great, I can do that for you. So when do I start? Exactly. That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Yuri, this has been so fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you for sharing all of your roller coaster journey with us.
Sure. It's been my pleasure. I hope that helps somebody somewhere.
It's helped me.
Perfect. Then I can put that check mark in.
Yes.
Good.
Perfect. Wasn't that amazing? Yuri's got some really good stuff to say, and I'm really glad I got to share this stuff with you today. So if you are curious about checking out any more of Yuri's things, like his podcast called Advance Your Art, all of the links to everything Yuri related is at barenakedbravery.com and in his show notes. So just type in the name Yuri, Yuri, when you go to barenakedbravery.com, and his face will pop up and you'll be able to see all the show notes. I am so grateful that you got to listen to this episode. I know there's a lot of stuff out there that you could listen to, and I don't take it lightly that you are hearing my voice right now. So thank you for being part of the Bare Naked Bravery community just by listening. If you want to take one step further, another thing you can do is share this podcast episode with a friend. So if you listen to this and you have a friend who you think might enjoy hearing some of the same things, you can just share this episode with them via text or email or whatever feels convenient to you, or word of mouth. Because I know if you're like me, then you're sitting with your friends going like, what are the latest podcasts? What have you been listening to lately? Share Bare Naked Bravery with your friends. That's the best way to share the bravery that you're hearing here in the show with the rest of the world. So you got the power. The ball's in your court. If you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by Lee Rosevere. He is the musician that we're featuring this season, and I'm really stoked to be using his stuff. If you want to find out more about him and the other artists and musicians and other authors that we featured on the show and their books, please visit barenakedbravery.com and click on resources. We've got a library of resources for you to go check out, filled to the brim with wonderful, wonderful things. So I am so looking forward to being with you next week because we have some wonderful things in the store for you as always. If you would like, there is a free bravery bundle for you just waiting. It's got a couple songs, a worksheet for bravery boosting questions, and it also has a coloring book just waiting for you. If that interests you, go to barenakedbravery.com and you'll get all of that and the link to join our Bare Naked Bravery Facebook group, which is really fun. We would love to have you join us. Okay, until next week, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself. Be vulnerable, be imaginative, be improvisational, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.